Most musicians are broke, not because there's no money in music, but because they've been conditioned to believe that struggling is normal. Underpaid gigs, music schools that never taught you how to make a living, and an industry that shames you for charging what you're worth. I know because I was in that cycle, gigging nonstop, teaching for peanuts, and still barely scraping by for years. But the moment I stopped accepting struggle as normal, everything changed. I built an online drum coaching business that gave me more financial and career freedom and ultimately helped me land one of the biggest gigs of my career, which is playing drums full-time on a West End theatre show in London. In this video, I'll break down why so many musicians stay broke, how you can escape the trap, and how to start making a real living in music. How many musicians do you know who are actually financially stable? Seriously, think about it. How many are scraping by, relying on unpredictable gigs, taking low-paying teaching jobs, or convincing themselves that next year will be the year that things finally turn around? And the worst part, most of them don't even question it. They believe this is just how it is, that struggling is part of the deal. I know because I used to think the same way. When I first moved to London, I was in the exact same situation, teaching at a local music school that paid next to nothing and doing crappy gigs just to cover my rent. I remember hauling my gear across the city, playing for nothing and thinking there has to be a better way to make a living in music. But when you look around, what do you see? You see musicians working harder than ever and they're still struggling. But they're following the same path. They're making the same choices and getting the same results. And if you're basing your career decisions on what other broke musicians are doing, you're guaranteeing that you stay exactly where they are. Musicians aren't broke because there's no money in music. They're broke because they've been taught that struggling is normal. From the moment we start playing, we're conditioned to believe that music is a struggle. Think about it. Music schools don't teach business. They teach you how to perform, how to analyze music, and how to compose, but do they actually teach you how to make a living? Gig culture also normalizes underpaying musicians. Playing for exposure and accepting lowball gigs and treating $100 in cash and a free beer as a win. The worst part is musicians will shame other musicians for trying to charge more. I remember the first time I raised my rates for my online drum coaching. The pushback wasn't from students, it was from other musicians. Oh, so you only care about money. Music should be for everyone, not just for people who can afford it. That's greedy. You know what's actually greedy? Music schools charging students 20 grand a year and paying teachers barely above minimum wage. Streaming platforms making billions while musicians see pennies per play. A venue expecting artists to play for exposure while they're charging $15 for a beer. But a musician charging a sustainable rate for their time, that's suddenly unfair? If you've studied music in college, you probably left full of ambition and ready to prove everyone wrong. You've heard it a million times. Music is a tough career. You'll never make good money. You should have a backup plan. And you think, screw that, I'm gonna make it work. And then you step into the real world. You start looking for gigs, teaching jobs, and session work, and whatever you can find. And then it hits you that everyone was right. But it's not because music isn't a viable career. It's because nobody ever taught you how to actually make a living with it. They taught you how to play, how to perform. But did they teach you how to get paid consistently for your skills? How to market yourself in a way that attracts gigs or students? Or how to charge rates that actually allow you to live off music? Probably not. And if you're like most musicians, you do what everyone else does. You take low-paying gigs, you teach for peanuts, and you tell yourself you just need to grind it out, and eventually something will click. But it doesn't, because just being a great musician is not enough. You have to understand how to turn your skills into income. And that's the part that most musicians never figure out. If you actually want a stable music career, relying on one income source is a losing strategy. Look at most professional musicians. They don't just gig. They diversify their income. Live shows, streaming royalties, merch, teaching, session work, licensing deals. It's very rare for a musician to only do one thing. The ones who make a stable income are stacking multiple revenue streams so they aren't completely screwed when one of them slows down. Yet so many musicians resist this idea. They'll complain about how streaming doesn't pay enough. They'll complain about how gigs don't pay well. But when you offer them a proven way to create stable income through teaching or coaching or another high-value skill, they immediately start making excuses. Well, I don't want to teach, or I don't want to run a business, or I don't want to do social media. Okay, then stay broke. No one's forcing you to do anything. But if what you're doing right now isn't working and you refuse to try something else, that's on you. Complaining doesn't pay the bills. Music is one of the few careers where people think that passion alone should be enough. You love playing? That's great. But the world doesn't owe you a paycheck just because you're talented. And yet a lot of musicians act like it does. There's this entitlement, the idea that if you're really good, money should just follow. That if people don't want to pay for your music, it's because the industry's broken, not because you haven't figured out how to offer something that people actually want. Look, if you're making hyper niche experimental noise music with a total audience of 20 people worldwide, don't be shocked when the financial return is low. That's not unfair. It's basic market demand. And here's where I differ from most musicians complaining about the industry. I'm not really interested in how things ought to be. I care about how things are and how we can adapt. Because the truth is that musicians today have more opportunity than ever before. We can sit around blaming streaming payouts, gig pay, or industry gatekeepers, or we can recognize that right now there are more ways to make a living in music than at any other point in history. The question isn't, is the system fair? It's, how do I make it work for me? The music industry is tough, no question, but for the first time in history, musicians have more control over their careers than ever before. You're no longer limited by your local scene. You don't need a record deal to release music. You don't need a university degree to make great money teaching. You can create your own career on your terms. Right now, musicians all over the world are finding ways to earn consistently, whether that's through online coaching, through memberships, Patreon, through YouTube, or other social media content. The tools, the audience, and the demand are there. The question is, are you going to take advantage of them? This isn't about waiting for your break or grinding it out until something clicks. It's about making a decision to build a career that actually works for you. Because the musicians who succeed aren't necessarily the best players. They're the ones who take action. At the end of the day, you have two choices. You can keep following the same blueprint that's left countless musicians underpaid, overworked, and struggling to survive. Or you can do what successful musicians are doing right now and taking control of their careers instead of waiting for someone else to fix the industry for them. Because here's the truth. Whatever you believe about the music industry will be true for you. If you think making a stable income as a musician is impossible, it will be. But if you see the opportunity, if you believe you can build a career on your terms, you'll find the path to make it happen. You already have the skills. The only thing missing is a plan to turn those skills into a stable, fulfilling career. Drop a comment below and tell me, how are you making money in music right now? And what's the biggest thing holding you back from earning more?